Alright, so now I want to do a small analysis of the painting you see behind me, namely Pieter Neefs the Elder. I'm not sure about the pronunciation, but anyways, this painting the Cathedral of Antwerp is a rather striking one. And it's a painting I in fact have on my living room wall, although I have yet to have it framed. I've been procrastinating the last 2-3 years at this point, so certainly at some point I need to get it framed. But anyways, it's quite a striking painting in many ways, and one that stems from the 17th century in the Baroque period. And it always inspires me in many ways, because you have this commotion and busyness in the foreground of the communal life, as it were, while there's this rather striking contrast in the background of this quiet, contemplative mood that always inspires me to do work in a way, because there's this quietness that you need for work and solitude, while at the same time you need to prioritize the social life. So it's a good reminder there. Although, of course, the original meaning is tied much more to that of religious devotion, and can be seen, in fact, as some sort of positive advertisement for the Catholic Church. But I will get into that later in the video. Lastly, I should state that it's hard to see in the picture you see here, but if you have it on your wall, there's a lot of shadow in the painting, so there's this interesting effect of it being more illuminated earlier in the daytime when you have more sun or more light in the room, and gradually there's a sort of shift in darkness, which I'll also quite enjoy. And certainly this play of shade is something that was used by many of these Flemish and Dutch artisans of the time. I would say Rembrandt being the most famous of his use of shadow.
So, to give some context on the artist himself, as well as the time period, we start by noting that Pieter Neefs the Elder worked in the historical context of 17th century Europe, more specifically in Antwerp, Belgium, where the motif of the painting is also set. As is customary, one often places a great deal of emphasis, as well as prestige, to the Renaissance era of painting, which is by many regarded as the pinnacle of achievements in terms of oil paintings. Well, one should not forget that it was the Baroque period which gave us artists such as Rembrandt, Caravaggio, and Velázquez. In addition, it is quite easy when comparing Renaissance art to that of Baroque art that one naturally extrapolates the same style of photorealism, the use of geometric projections, as well as observing the strong religious themes, and in this sense I can understand the strong continuation people draw between the two styles of the two periods. However, let's not forget that Renaissance Italy, which gave rise to the Four Masters, e.g. Da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, and Donatello, prided itself on the philosophical doctrine of humanism, as well as being the most secular when compared to both Germany and England, where the Renaissance was spread after it had reached Italy. This can in part be explained by cultural donations by wealthy, secular individuals, most famously seen by the Medici family living in northern Italy, who made it possible to get art funded from secular sources, which were not tied directly to the church or the monarchy, as was in fact much more common in both Germany and England. In addition, there was an emphasis away from purely divine matters when it came to the tenets of the philosophy of humanism, which both revived Greco-Roman themes as well as making an entry for subjects such as literature, philosophy, science, and history to be discussed from a more secular perspective. Lastly, one may point out the sense of decentralization which took place in Italy, where the political structure at the time was very much tied to independent city-states. Yeah, and let's not forget that Italy was united in the later part of the 19th century as a nation, so quite late indeed. In fact, the whole notion of nation-states is a relative modern conception in many ways. In any case, this accordingly allowed both cultural competition to be enhanced between differing city-states, as well as diminishing the strong monarchical centrality found in England at the time, or the strong central control of the Holy Roman Empire found in Germany likewise. Therefore, it is this secularism that I wish to touch upon, as the Baroque painting scenery of the 17th century can very much be viewed through the lens of Counter-Reformation, which took place at the time and for which the artist Pieter Neefs felt happy to be working within. Both culturally and in a religious sense, there must therefore have been a strong sense of religious revival taking place in his working habitat. Neefs himself, who it is estimated was born around the time 1578 to 1590 in this time interval, would have been exposed to much of it, to put it in modern terms, Catholic advertisement, which in many ways began at the Council of Trent, where key statements and clarifications concerning the Catholic doctrine were addressed, as well as offering up condemnations of what it deemed to be heresies committed by the proponents of Protestantism, and thus formed an integral part of the Counter-Reformation movement. It is then natural to view Neefs as working within the Counter-Reformation, and one can in fact see the painting in question, the interior of Antwerp, as a contribution towards advertisement towards the Catholic Church. That is not to take away any of its artistic merit, as it's clear that the artist, although as he must have been in possession of a strong sense of religiosity, took aim at his artistic oil creations with the utmost and highest sense of artistic pride, along with creative expression, as we witness throughout his catalogue working as a painter. The subject of this painting, along with many others from the Neefs catalogue, concerns itself with architectural interiors, of which it is said that he was a working specialist in, and there was in addition one building type that would plague his works more often than others, namely that of church architectural interiors. In addition, it is also remarked that his Flemish home world did not at the time have an abundance of these types of painters, such that Neefs must have been in high demand at times, despite the fact that it is mentioned that he struggled financially at times throughout his life. Neefs then drew inspiration from Dutch architectural painters such as Hendrik van Steenwyck the Elder, where it is conjectured that Neefs himself was a student of either the Steenwyck the Elder or the younger son, and he would go on to foster an artistic family, namely the Neefs family, which included his two sons, Ludovicius Neefs and Pieter Neefs, most commonly referred to as Neefs the Younger, who alongside their father specialized in architectural interiors. This brings semblance to that of the Bach family, where multiple children were also musicians and composers alongside Johann Sebastian Bach. To conclude then, we may state that father and son van Steenwyck and the two generations of the family Neefs painters are considered today to be prime representatives of the Antwerp school of architectural painting, where the motive of church interiors seems to have been a particular favorite obsession of these artists. Now, to get into some details about the painting itself, we note, as briefly mentioned before, the high degree of both vivacity and movement which predominates the front perspective of the painting. It should be noted that invoking a strong sense of emotion, dramaturgy, and suspense was much more common in the style of Baroque painting than that of the Renaissance paintings, where there was an emphasis placed more on balanced classical themes, which can be taken to be more in line with a sense of thematic rationality, idealized notions of beauty, as well as giving more leeway and more dominance to carefully placed proportions in paintings. In our case, the invoking of emotion seems to be much more of a jovial, ecstatic flavor, rather than extreme dramatic narrations of situations as typified, I think, extremely clearly in the works of, say, the Spanish painter Giuseppe di Ribera, who has some of the most uncomfortably graphic biblical historical depictions brought to life on the canvas page that I have ever seen. Returning to our painting, even the beggar with a stump leg seems less agonizing in the painting as opposed to Ribera's work, where we observe him wearing some rather colorful attire in our case. We should also mention here that, importantly, Neefs would take a strong creative leeway in his paintings, as he would not pay too much detail in terms of accurately portraying the interiors he was working with, and would at times therefore either exaggerate or make up his own details when it came to the exact interior details. More controversially, I don't believe for a second the assembled characters that we observe in the painting actually were present at the time in the church, while the artist was making preparations for the painting. At least not all of them. It is much more probable that Neefs drew both from his own imagination, as well as observing characters outside of the church, which he then subsequently decided to include into his painting. The resultant effect is that we observe the vivacity of the local life, as we could imagine outside a situ locale in the city of Antwerp at the time. We thus get a glimpse of city life at the time, and Neefs wants to remind us that the church is open to anyone who wants to enter, thereby contrasting the view that the church locale should remain a place of static, quiet piety, along with a strict regulatory framework in terms of what is and what is not allowed inside the church premises. But as a good storyteller must do, Neefs also brings along the contrasting view of the deep meditative locale of the church alongside its pious adherents, as we witness various characters seeped in quiet reflection and deep prayer, seeking solitude inside the cathedral walls. In terms of architecture, one should pay special attention to the center frame roof of the painting, where we see what appears to be an endless row of arches stretching itself towards infinity. This infinity may hold religious connotations, as we may view it as symbolizing the infinite and transcendent nature of the Christian God, and a use of linear perspective to achieve this technique was also present since the Renaissance, but the same effect may be used, of course, to defer a different meaning depending on the artist and intent. Lastly, one of my favorite features of the painting is the placement of perspective itself in the painting, where the vantage point given to us observers is placed seemingly suspended in midair. Neefs could not have made sketches from this perspective himself unless he was allowed to bring a giant crane into the church, so it is more likely that he tried his best to imagine this perspective as best as he could before making preparations for the painting itself. Neefs the Elder can then be said to work parallel to that of great movie directors such as Kenji Mizoguchi or Stanley Kubrick, who both prided themselves with their artistic crane shots when filming. Mizoguchi in particular would employ a very suspended perspective, achievable by the use of smart crane shots, while Kubrick also used crane shots and was interested in different compositional styles of movie shots. While I have heard Kubrick compared to that of the great 19th century painter Caspar David Friedrich, with his painting Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog, raised in particular, this video could perhaps be seen as a small attempt to draw attention between Kubrick and Neefs' work. In any case, the resultant effect for all of these artists is allowing the observer to take in the vastness and grandeur of the perspective, along with allowing us to achieve narrative clarity of all the elements which have been placed in the painting. For Neefs, there must have been a strong sense of temporal along with spiritual reflection that he wanted to convey, whereby choosing an elevated perspective engrosses a sense of detachment, where the resultant effect is that we as viewers are allowed to take in the scenery of the church, seemingly from outside both of space and time. Okay, that wraps up this short analysis of the painting Interior of Antwerp by the Flemish master Pieter Neefs the Elder, which was painted in a very important time period of oil paintings, relating 17th century art, I might add. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video, so cheers!